Welcome everybody to our live stream today. I am excited to talk about a more modern way to do our exercise prescription. Really, we're trying to push the envelope in our industry to make sure we're doing everything we can to help our clients to the best of our ability and to really modernize and professionalize what physical health practitioners are doing. And this is the beginning of that. So welcome, and I hope if you feel like if you have questions throughout, then throw them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer all the questions. If I can't get to the question during this live, then I will definitely get to the questions after the fact, whether it's put out another video, answer it in the next live, send out something. So so feel free. And it is 7:37, and we'll try and get through this as effectively and efficiently as possible. I should probably move my mouse closer. There we go. Okay, so client-centered physical health practices. This is really what we're talking about at Accolite is the biggest difference between sort of the big box clinics and studios and gyms and the private training studios, undoubtedly like the one you're running, or your private practice, your independent practice, your private clinics, studios, gyms, that type of thing. There's a really big difference in the methodologies that are happening, and what we truly feel is the private studios, boutique gyms, clinics, and people like you that are running those things are the mavericks in the industry. I've been trying to innovate and help my clients to the best of my ability throughout my career. And if you're running a place like that, then there's a very good chance that you're doing the same thing. So this is going to, the information that we go through today is going to help you, again, further that, push a little farther, help your clients more with this. It's a more effective strength training prescription method. And I'm sure you're going to appreciate it, love it. It's, we've worked pretty hard to develop it and make sure it's great. So let's just get right into it. So the number one thing, there's an elephant in the room in our industry, and the elephant in the room is adherence to strength training. Over my 27-year, 28-year career, when we look at the stats, it hasn't changed. And what's really important there is that, let me just switch this. What's really important is adherence to strength training is the backbone of everything that we're trying to do. So if we can't improve how much our clients are, what they're doing, no matter what we prescribe, if they're not doing it, they're not going to get the results. And one of the reasons we're looking at a better prescription model on how to prescribe exercises, because if you change the model a little bit, then you affect the mindset of the client, and we can improve adherence to the exercises that we're prescribing. And if we can do that, then we change everything about what's happening. We change the results. We change. It's really becomes much more effective for the results for the client, for your business, and for everything else. So it's really important that we improve the adherence to strength training for the exercises that we're prescribing, whether it's for injury, whether it's for performance training or reconditioning, whatever. We've got to get them to do the stuff, and this is what we're talking about today. This is not the most effective way to do this. So one of the, we talk about results and revenue and client retention and all these things that affect our business. But I can tell you there's one thing that's really, if you've been in this industry for any length of time, I know you've experienced this. You get a client that walks in and they're a new client. We talk to them about what's going on. We talk to them about, um, what their previous experience was. Oops. We talk to them about what their previous experience was. And, they tell us, I'm going to try something. Actually, LP, if you could tell me if you see me in big screen right now or you see the presentation, that would be great. We need to know that. Or if anyone can tell me. Anyone's watching on YouTube or you're watching on LinkedIn or you're watching, if you can see me on big screen or you see the presentation, I'd like to be able to connect with you and talk to you on your screen so that you can see me, not just stare at a presentation the whole time, because let's be honest, we've all had enough of that, Okay, moving on. So we've all had this. We've all had a client come in. They tell us what's going on. We ask them, okay, so what have you done for this in the past? Might be one of the questions that you ask. Is certainly one of the questions that I ask. And we've had those people say to us, well, I saw this other practitioner, or maybe I saw many other practitioners, but it didn't help. If people aren't sticking to the exercises that you're prescribing, not sticking to the program, they're not doing what you're asking them to do, not being held accountable, then I can guarantee you there are people having that exact conversation with a different practitioner about you. And that is one of the harshest things on a professional reputation, because you're not there to defend yourself. You're not there to say, it's like, well, wait a second, I gave you a bunch of stuff to do. You didn't get better because you didn't do the stuff that I told you to do. So really important that we don't end up in this situation where, going back to their doctor and like, yeah, I saw Greg, but it didn't help. Because that's an ouch, right? So then we catch ourselves over a career that, over my career, I've certainly been in this situation myself where I've been like, well, I mean, if they don't do it, if they don't do the exercises, then I can't help them, right? And it's pretty easy to say that. But I'll tell you what, the slap in the face is the straight truth. It's not that, they're not, it's not that they're not doing it so we can't help them. The simple truth is you're not helping them. So we're the professionals in the space, and as much as, in my early career, I really felt like, I'm not here to motivate people necessarily. They should be driven. They should do it. I'm here as a technical specialist. I know biomechanics. I'm helping them with biomechanics. I'm helping them with their injury. The reality, dawned on me years into my career that if they're not doing it, whether it's me or it's them, then you're not helping people. And we need to get past ourselves and start helping people. That's really what we need to do. So that's what we're going to address today. It's all about being the maverick in the industry, being the person that does everything they can to run a client-centered business and help the people get to where they want to be. We have to hold them to some expectations. They should hold us to some expectations. But if you're going to be a true driver of change in people's lives, then let's just do everything we can, set up things properly, and make sure that we're helping as many people as possible, staying positive, and really adding value to these people's lives. No matter if you're doing injury rehab, you're doing reconditioning, you're doing high performance training, you're doing fitness. Um, these are all what we call PHPs. And if you're going to be a maverick PHP, then you're going to do physical health practitioner is what PHP stands for. Then you're going to do everything you can to help them get better and help them stick to the program. And this is what we're talking about today. So there are 3 stages to getting people to, to do the right exercises and then stick to them. And so we're not going to do this all in one live today. We're going to do it in 3. But the first one is effective prescription, which is what we're talking about today. And if we can get this right, then everything else that we'll talk about in the next time we're online, we'll be talking about how to set them up with the right mindset and right meaningful purpose and all that sort of stuff. But we got to get our prescription right first. We have to have the right information, and all of this, what you learn today, will actually build buy-in and trust, and allow you to do more with your clients and allow you to be more successful quickly. And when we think about effective prescription or tracking or doing testing and objective prescription or objective measuring assessments, all that sort of stuff, oftentimes when we talk about these things, we think of this model where we're we'll take a client and we'll do an initial assessment. Maybe it's for an injury or maybe it's for reconditioning. Maybe you're doing a fitness test at the beginning, and then we'll do all this training, and then weeks later we're going to test it again. And really, it's when we finally, and this became really interesting for me. It's like, okay, why is adherence to strength training, the accountability, and all that stuff? Why is it not changing over time? Well, that archaic model where we're just testing at intervals at 4, 6, 8 weeks. Sometimes I've talked to places that are testing every 3 months. You have to think of it from the client's point of view. They don't know what we know. They aren't into the world the way we are. They aren't driven to do this stuff the way we are. They're driven to do completely different stuff. Stuff that probably when they talk to you about it, you'd be like, well, oh man, I'm not driven to do that stuff either. We have to set them up properly so that they're driven to do it, and doing the testing every 4, 6, 8 weeks or whatever is not setting them up properly, because we need more frequent milestones for them. We need stuff that they can follow on an everyday basis and see their progress on an everyday basis. Like the 10,000 steps program, it's an everyday thing. They try and get to as many steps as they can get in that day or whatever. We need to be doing the same thing for strength. And, when we talk about measuring stuff, because at Accurately we talk about measuring everything, we have the capacity to measure strength and sleep and stress and nutrition and cardiovascular training and blood saturation and all this stuff. But up until very recently, when we developed our new technology, that measuring strength properly and on an ongoing basis in the client's hands really just hasn't existed. There's force dynamometers and stuff like that that exist right now, but you can't take $1,000 force dynamometer, hand it to your clients so they can go off and train, because you'd have to have like 20 $1,000 force dynamometers lying around, which really isn't realistic. So this is one of the biggest changes we've made, is making this type of technology more accessible and so that we can get it into the client's hands. When I realized things needed to change was I was working, in my early career, I worked in varsity, I worked in a university setting. Then I went into a clinical setting outside of the university. Then I went back into the university system. And one of the things that was always remarkable about the elite system, whether it's universities or schools or pro teams or whatever, is the amount of the access to services that the clients had. And so that they had like access to all this technology and access to different types of equipment and different types of practitioners, and they had teams behind them, and they had all this stuff going on. And it dawned on me when I left the university system again that I needed to find a way to bring this model, this service model, this, the athlete or the clients could really look to me as the point person for all of their health needs and all of their, whatever it was for their journey in health, because they really, really need it. Because even when you're talking about elite athletes, the elite athletes, the reason they need that high level of service is not because they're elite athletes. It's because, as I said before, they don't know what we know. They don't know that, the answers to all of these questions. And you're talking about elite athletes that maybe have been exposed to a lot of different things and a lot of different coaches and a lot of different philosophies. The regular person who, might be any kind of other worker in any kind of other industry, just, they don't have access to any of this sort of stuff. Well, we're the professionals in this space. And this is why I said, at the beginning of my career, I didn't think I was the motivator for, if they weren't driven to do their exercises, well, that's a them thing. They aren't us, and they need our help. And if we can help them properly, then we'll be able to change things. So I have worked tirelessly over the last 12 years, 15 years, I guess, to bring that model, to bring this service model to the public. And this prescription model that we're about to talk about, and I won't delay much longer because I'm not delaying. I just want to set you up properly. That bringing this model is part of that, because it helps the client. And this is the number one thing, and when I talk about this really often, is we have to be doing things that the client understands. So when we do our assessments, when we do our prescription, when we do our follow-ups, it has and our tracking, they have to be in metrics that the client easily understands, can be inspired by, can follow and know exactly what you're talking about without, ever looking back at their, app and saying, it's like, oh, what was I supposed to do again? Or what, things need to be clear. So this is this is our goal, and bringing that service model. This is the first part of it. I mean, we'll talk about more in the other live streams as well, but this was my goal. So if we're going to change and help, get this prescription model, if we're going to help clients understand what's going on, feel better about their strength training, then we needed, when I looked at the elite model, there were three things that were really, really different than in the public sector. They were customer contact, so how much contact you are in with your client and how often, how we're tracking what's going on, the frequency that we're tracking, and the accountability being on both sides. So it's really important to me that people understand that, yes, they should be accountable for their actions, whether they're doing their exercises or not. But I am also accountable for making sure that I'm giving them the right things to do. So I'm not going to talk today about, because there are basically four things. If we're gonna change all of that, we have to look at our, how our session plans are set up and what our, client expectations are. That's not in the realm of today's broadcast, but What we will talk about today is how to set up better accountability and how to set up better, more frequent progress markers that our clients can follow, and that's with this prescription model. And the reality is, and my expectation is not that there's no expectation that you should, radically change your business now. You got to turn everything upside down, and like we don't have the capacity to do that. Any solution that we provide, what we work really hard on is making sure it's simple, it's effective, it's easy to implement. Because none of us has more time. We don't have more time to do an assessment. If I give you something that requires you more time to prescribe or more time to do this, we don't have more time with our clients. We've set up our businesses the way we are because it's what we feel is best for the clients, what we feel is best for us. We still got to run a business. We still got to do these things. So it's important that we're not rocking the boat too much. That these solutions are very effective and easy to implement and seamlessly implement into your business. So the first part I'm going to talk about is the tracking and progress. So, if you've had a client come in and, and we've all done this. It's client comes in, having you gave them exercises in the past. They came back and did you do all your exercises? And they just say, yeah. Okay. Like, how many did you do? I did all the repetitions. Okay. But how hard did you work? I don't know. Some of them were hard and some of them were easy. And it's like, did you do all of the sets or, well, it depended on the day. Like, I have so many questions because I really have no idea, because I have no empirical evidence that you've done any of the stuff that I told you to do. And very often in our industry, we have to now bring them aside and say, okay, show me the exercises that you did, and then they're doing them wrong. And, it's like the whole thing becomes so unclear that we really don't know what they've done, what they haven't done, and if we're going to be successful. And that's really important. If we don't feel like we're going to be successful, it gets pretty frustrating. So the gold standard right now is we use sets and repetitions to prescribe exercise, right? Here's the exercise. I'm going to show you the exercise, and I want you to do, 3 sets of 20 repetitions. And it's really, it's a model that's worked for us for a long time, but it's really not set up for tracking and reportability and accountability and all that sort of stuff. So what we're changing to is essentially measuring everything. So I'm going to show you something first. So this is a force dynamometer. It's the one we created. Now, if you have a force dynamometer that you use, that you can set up, and you'll see the way you need to set it up. You don't need to use ours. You can use whatever one you want. The way this one is set up, it's just a simple anchor. So it's a smart anchor. You can, anchor it to a wall or anchor it to, I have a ladder back there that I anchor things to. And then once it's anchored to something, you put a resistance band through here or a static belt or anything like that. And, depending on the exercise you need to do. And incidentally, like a lot of the exercises I prescribe, I'm using, good quality resistance bands, or, that maybe they have bands at home, the clients, if they're going to train, or if they're going to train with me, I still use this because, it's just a little bit more universal. Not only that, but like 70% of the population would rather train at home. They don't have a lot of equipment. So now they just need an anchor point and a couple of resistance bands that are appropriate for what we're trying to give them. And all of a sudden they have like a complete home gym and they're set up properly. So all this thing does, I'm going to actually bring this forward too. So we have the app here too, you can see. I know it's hard to see. And we can connect the app to the device, and the app will show exactly what's happening on the device. So the device, like any force dynamometer, just reads the amount of force that is being applied. So when they pull on the elastic, you can see that there's a measurable load there. Like right now, there's actually 1 pound of elastics hanging off of it. And and this thing remembers, what your best score was. So you can, if you did whatever exercise you did, you can see like how much force you were actually able to generate at your best repetition. And then what this thing does is it over repetitions, it will record every repetition you do. So how this applies to our prescription model is there's a couple of things that we're looking for. One is how much force can you generate, okay, in one repetition. And this is like, if you do manual muscle testing, this is what we talk about. It's like, okay, how much force can you generate? That's really not objective. So I use this in my assessments when I'm doing manual muscle testing to measure, how much force can you generate in one repetition? And that's interesting. But what we found is it's not enough information. So what we want to go to as well is, you can see this number down here. We're at 104 already, and the maximum on here was 21 pounds. It's clearer on here than it is on the app. But what this is recording is what your force generation capacity is. So I do more and more repetitions. I'm still generating almost or around the same amount of force, but it's, instead of me having to count repetitions, now all of a sudden I'll go until like I just can't go anymore, and I get a score at the end for how much force I generated through that whole set. So how this applies to what's going on, what we're talking about from a prescription model, is instead of now, prescribing exercises with sets and repetitions, we're prescribing exercises based on, I want to know how much force you generate per repetition. So I'll prescribe and say, okay, so every time you do this, I want you to generate at least 20 pounds of force for each repetition you do. Perfect. Okay. Then I want you to accumulate, because I test it with them, just when I'm prescribing the exercises. It doesn't take any more time. I show them the exercise. I make them do a full set, see when they get tired, whatever. Okay, how much force you can accumulate per set. Perfect. So now every set, I want you to be producing 20 pounds of force, and you got to 200 pounds of total accumulation with every repetition. So I want you to be at or above 200 pounds per set. Then I want you to do 4 sets. So that's 800 pounds of force generated per workout. And we have the capacity with the app to be able to expand that out over, a number of weeks. Let's say, so for my clients, I don't typically see them. I see them every second week. So they're going to do like, maybe I want them to do that specific exercise program 4 times between now and the next time I see them. Well, that now gives me, so 8, 16, 3,200 pounds of force generated for that exercise over the next 2 weeks before I see you. And this gives us a lot of information on what is going on. First of all, let me see what the next slide is. First of all, when you prescribe in this model, it is very clear to your clients how hard they need to work, how much work they need to do, and how often they need to do it, and what they need to get to. And they can come back now and say, when they, after the 2 weeks, and you say, did you do your exercises? It's recorded on an app, and they can show you like, no, I didn't do my exercises. Okay. What's interesting about that, if they didn't do it, because it's recorded on an app, if they consistently don't do their exercise and they end up at another practitioner, they're actually going to be much more reluctant to say, I saw this practitioner and it didn't help, because it's going to be very present in their minds that they didn't do the stuff because you asked them to show exactly what they didn't do it, and now it's solidified in their head that it really was a them issue, not a you issue. So that's really important. The other part of it from the accountability point of view is they come back and they say, I did my exercises. See, check here. And we look at it. Great. How are you progressing? Progressing really well. Excellent. So let's keep going, because, we did the exercises, you're progressing, everything's going great. But what if they come back and say, yeah, I did all the exercises. Here's the proof that I did them, and I'm not getting any better. Like I said before, there should be accountability on the health practitioner's side to get things right. Maybe I missed the ball on something. Maybe maybe we were testing something out. We weren't sure it was going to work, and it was like, okay, so that didn't work. Now we have proof that it didn't. Assuming they did the exercise properly, which you can check, whatever. But it gives you something. It gives you real information, objective information that something isn't right, and we need to make a change. And so there's nothing obscure about it anymore. And that's a huge win for us as practitioners. Now, the next thing I want to go through, because we're going to go through some case studies on how to progress these exercises and how to prescribe and what we're assessing and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot of information in this live stream. I want to show you my methodology, how I view what stage my clients are at, so that we can understand what we're prescribing and how we're prescribing it. I'll go through it quickly because I don't want to take it. I understand you have time limitations just like I do. So the reconditioning timeline. This is like super important to understand. So in the reconditioning timeline, if you imagine a line that's like the blue line, the blue arrow there, on the far left is injury. So at the extreme left, this is injury, incapacitated, can't move, whatever. That's the worst type of injury. And at the far other end, at the end of the arrow, is high performance. So this is the highest level of high performance, Olympic level performance. We can all agree that all of us are somewhere along this timeline, right? So it, knowing exactly where we are in this timeline, and I'm going to define everything as we go through, is really, really important. The yellow line that has the 80%, that is the line where, people are typically around 80% rehab from their injuries. It's the line where they stop being able to justify maybe paying for physio, or they run out of insurance, or, it gets really hard for them to justify continuing that in the injury realm in their heads. They almost feel like they're ready to go. But you and I know as practitioners, they aren't really ready to go. They have the latent injury, they have some dysfunction left over, whatever. It's just most of it is gone and most of their pain is gone. The other yellow line is the line where people are fully ready to engage in fitness. So there is a bunch of stuff between that 80% line and the fitness line that we need to address to set them up properly. Because what's happening too often is people are doing activities that are past the fitness line, and they are not ready for that. That's not where they are on this timeline. And if they're doing activities that are past that fitness line and they aren't prepared, they inevitably get kicked all the way back down to under the 80% line, where they get injured again and they're restarting the process. And this is happening, you don't have to talk to too many people to know that this is happening on a very regular basis. So understanding where they are and using this to help your clients understand where they are, so it's very clear where they are and what the dangers are if they don't follow this methodology, can go a long way to helping do a better job with clients and helping them understand what they really need to do to have long-term success with their, whether it's rehabbing their injury and getting back to activity. And we talk about that in some of our other live streams, where we're talking about, like how to set them up properly from a mindset point of view. But understanding where they are on this timeline is really important. So the IRP3, this is injury rehab phase 3. So this is, it's actually a little bit below, before the 80% line is when phase 3 starts. But injury rehab phase 3 is the first phase. So what I call the reconditioning zone is between the 80% and the fitness line. This is the reconditioning zone. We're reconditioning these people to get them ready to let loose, train, and be at much lower risk for injury if we can get them through the reconditioning zone. So the first one is we look at their latent injuries and try and resolve all of that sort of stuff before we move forward. The second phase that I look at, and some of them, obviously we do these simultaneously, some of them, is PFP1. So this is pre-fitness phase 1. And what I'm specifically looking at in my biomechanical assessment is their postural imbalances. And we'll talk about how to measure these things, moving forward. PFP2, so pre-fitness phase 2, is we're looking at their posture and their ability to dissociate. So really their body control and their body control under stress. PHP3, we look at their overall biomechanics, their core stability, how much, not just dissociative control, but how much linked strength they have through different types of movements and different types of stability drills. That's, at least in my model, that we're looking at. And then PHP4 is a suitable platform for training. So we're teaching them the basics of things like squatting, lifting, pushing, pulling, pressing, pulling down, pulling up, whatever it is. There are basic versions of all of these movements. We're making sure that they have the mobility and all of the things that they need to have a really good platform before we move forward. What's very interesting about this model and looking at the reconditioning zone and all this stuff that needs to happen, and helping your clients understand what needs to happen. When we look at business models, we look at where are all the clients, what do we want to work on? But if we're working with driven clients, like where are all the clients? And what's very interesting about the population distribution on this line is, when you think about it, most people, the vast majority of people, are in the reconditioning zone. There are very few people that are, debilitated, injured, really, there are definitely a population of people there. And there are very few people, but definitely a population, that are at the highest level of high performance training. The majority of the people that, and we can find lots of driven, active, healthy people that are in this reconditioning zone. And if we can understand where they are by measuring it and showing them exactly what they're, should be working on, then, it makes it can make a huge difference in our businesses. So we're going to look at 3 case studies. Before I do that, actually, let me just, understanding that the reconditioning timeline and bringing that, maybe a screenshot, watch this and screenshot this and show it to your clients, having that very brief conversation with them about, like, okay, this is the reconditioning line and this is where you're at. And these are the things that we need to work on with you to get you to here. And if you don't do these things, which you can choose to do, that's totally your choice. But if you're doing things that are appropriate for later on and you're not set up for it, this is, where you're going to get injured and you're going to go back down. Has this ever happened to you before? And they'll inevitably say, oh yeah, this has definitely happened to me before. So, so really it's a powerful tool that you can use to, help your clients understand where they're at. So let's look at a few different models. So we're going to look at post-ACL surgery for those of you that are in injury rehabilitation. We're going to look at minor back issues. So whether you're an athletic therapist like myself, a physiotherapist, or a kinesiologist, or a personal trainer, people, the majority of people are walking around with some sort of back pain because of the lifestyles we have. So many of us are going to deal with that. So having a look at that and what we need to do. And then there's the, I want to stop feeling like I'm aging population where, they have aches and pains and this and that, whatever, stiff in the morning, but there's no real injury necessarily. There might be some latent stuff that you discover through your assessment, but whatever. We're going to look at all three of these, what we can do and how we can help them the most. So I'm going to be referencing this again, so the IRP1. I'll reference IRP1 and 2, which is the injury rehab phase 1 and 2, which is before the 80% line. And I'll reference these markers as we go through this. So if we look at our post-ACL, and we want to set them up properly. First of all, we have to understand and have this why it's really good to have a conversation with your client about this is, okay, here's where you're at. You're at IRP2. They're not like completely debilitated. Maybe it's not the day after their surgery. So we do, because in IRP1, we're doing like range of motion and getting all that stuff back. As soon as they're cleared to do some sort of exercise, we're not testing people's strength in IRP1 because we're typically not allowed to, and it's typically dangerous to do that. So, let's just assume we get through that phase and we go to IRP2. IRP2, we need to, it's good to start having a conversation of where we're at, measuring where we're at so the client understands it, and where we need to get to. What's our target? Well, in our industry, what happens a lot in our industry there are a lot of practitioners or a lot of clients that have this expectation that's like, I just, want to be able to walk from the couch to the fridge. It's like, well, that's not really real for any of us. No matter how sedentary you think you are, there are activities you need to be able to do. You want to be able to do the activities you love to do, right? Especially if we're talking to people about health. Now, yes, there's going to be some people, the minority, if you look at it, it's actually the minority of people that don't have no interest in that at all. Okay, that's them. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the people that, okay, if we have a conversation about the reconditioning timeline, what's your target? Your target is to, get back to the activities you love to do. The unfortunate reality about an ACL is if you had a surgery, there's all these things we need to go through, getting, initial strength back and all that sort of stuff. And we want to get you to here so that you can go back to training and do whatever you want and not worry about it. So that's the first thing. So in IRP2, one of the first things that's really good to set up is a comparison target. So we can measure, if you have a force dynamometer, or if you use the Accolade, like the force dynamometer that we have, you can measure how much force they can produce before they, have pain, or how much force they can produce based on, the atrophy of the muscle from, depending on how long it took them to get their surgery, and then compare it to the other leg. Because that gives us a real numeric target, an objective target to work from one to the next. And that's really, from a client's point of view, this is really powerful stuff because now they can actually see with numbers something that they understand. Oh, this is where I need to get to. Perfect. Amazing. Okay. And it's also good for setting up limitations. So there are definitely clients that we see on a regular basis that maybe work too hard, and that's why they keep getting injured and stuff like that. So, maybe we're going to set them up limitations, say like, okay, at 15 pounds of pressure, your hamstring curl, you're good. And at 20, you're too much pain. Right now, I want you to stay at 15 for the next couple of days, until we reevaluate it, or you can see that your pain isn't going into that. So I've found that some of the people that I've worked with that just want to push too hard, I can set a real limitation with them and say, like, no, I don't want you going past this number when you train. And so it can be useful. On the other side of things, we have these people that don't necessarily work hard enough. So we're setting the opposite threshold of, I want you to be at or above this, or else you're not working hard enough. So that's really important. And then we're checking off drop-offs. So this is in our accumulation score. They're doing, instead of just doing a 1 repetition test, which can be, at best can be, limiting. We're going to do a test where we get them to do as many repetitions as they can. Post ACL surgery, doing hamstring curls or whatever, doing leg extensions, whatever you're trying to do. And you're going to see that the drop off can be really, really high. They might be able to generate 20 pounds of force or 30 pounds of force in 1 repetition, but ask them to do it multiple times and it might just drop right off after 3-4 repetitions. And if you test the other leg, and you're testing the capacity of the other leg, the force generation capacity, so that, they can generate 70, 80 pounds of force with the other leg, and they can get to 1,000 or 1,200 pounds of force generated in a set. Well, now we can check that drop off in the injured leg and start working on capacity as well as a one-time strength. So very, very good. I can't tell you how useful this is to use, because it's much more objective. But, all of us in the industry, or many of us in the industry, what's the worst thing in this industry? Being a rep counter and never having to count another rep ever again because of this prescription model is huge. So now from there, we do our prescription, give them the exercises they need to do, test their full capacity, so they have how much force they need to generate per repetition, how much force accumulation they need to get, their force generation capacity per set, how much force you want them to generate per workout, and then get the technology into their hands so that they can go off and train. Whether they're training in your studio on their own so that you can work with another client or whatever, or they're, just bringing the technology home, which is one of the biggest changes that we've made, is we've made this device affordable enough that you can get a bunch of them, and then you can lend, rent, or sell them to your clients so that they can do all the training on their own and track on an everyday basis exactly what they're doing and progress, and then come back to you and proudly show you all the stuff they've done and how well it worked. So, it makes a huge difference. So many of us know that, we have these force dynamometers that are living in a drawer in the clinic because nobody ever uses them, because they're just impractical to use. And, those numbers, you certainly can't train with them. So one of the biggest changes we made is make it so that we can train with them and get it into the client's hand, get them go do their exercises, whether it's in your facility or at home, and have all the numbers to follow. So that's a huge one. From there, we've set them up, and we've done some preliminary stuff, and we progress into IRP3. IRP3, what we can do in IRP3 is start looking at their, because in injury rehab phase 3, we want to start looking at their stability, and also, single foot standing and doing all this sort of stuff. Well, it's really interesting to be able to, look at all these little drills that we can get them to do to manage their stability. But what if we could measure them? What if we could have them stand on one leg and do some mini squats against some resistance that's pulling them one way or pulling them the other, and that resistance is measured? And now we have a number, and we can see how they're progressing, even if it's an isometric number, so that they have to hold against this much force, and and then rotate their hip, or go through a squat, or whatever it is the drills you're doing. We're adding outside forces, and we're measuring this from a stability point of view in that third phase of injury rehabilitation. This is real game changer for your reportability. If you're doing post ACL rehab and you're working with a pro team, and the coach keeps coming back and saying, it's like, okay, are they ready? How close are they? Whatever. And you can give them hard numbers of like, okay, on their right leg, they can do this. And on their left, on their injured leg, they can do that. And those numbers are very clear. Now, the staff that you're working with has a clear understanding of exactly where this client is, or where the athlete is. So that's a huge one. And then again, we can look at postural control, which we're going to look at again a little bit farther. I don't want to go into too much detail with this, but checking their drop-off times. So in the stability drills, because we're relighting the nervous system and making sure that it's working properly and reacting properly, we might set them up so that they can hold against an isometric resistance. That's like the one leg standing against rotation, trying to just hold themselves stable. And then we might time it to see how much time they can actually hold that for before they start dropping off. So it's another kind of drop-off test that you can do that's measurable, that you can put in your charts, and your client can understand it. I can do it for 10 seconds. Now I can do it for 30, that sort of stuff. And again, never count another repetition, and let them go and do the work on their own. Okay. And then, so we get into, and this is a really interesting, I talk to a lot of people that do injury rehab, and they're like, well, I talk about that. There's often a conversation about client retention and having people stick around long enough, to do all the things they need to do. Injury is an interesting time to be able to talk to people and look at what they need to be able to do to get to where they want to go. And, I'll go back to that, reconditioning timeline and explaining that to your clients. What this really affects when your clients fully understand this is it affects your client retention rate, because your client now fully understands the process to get through, and they'll go farther into the process. And even if you don't do after, PFP1, you don't do that sort of stuff, you do injury rehab and you're passing off, then, it's still, now you can work with your network to refer to the next person and communicate where they're at, according to all that sort of stuff. So you get better client retention and better relationship with your network you're passing things off at the appropriate time based on objective measures. So that can make a big difference. So at this point in PFP1, we're measuring their overall body imbalances. So like a simple example of that would be, how much strength they can push on one side versus pushing on the other side. With our post ACL is like, how much, maybe at this point, how much they could deadlift on one leg versus deadlift on the other leg, or looking at imbalances from, groin versus hip strength ratio imbalances. So we're looking at the ratios through their body, and these are things now that we can measure, and we can measure one-time repetition and force generation capacity. So I'm not going to go in. There are a whole bunch of tests that I do that are imbalance tests, but measuring this stuff empirically can help your clients understand exactly where they're at and say like, okay, well, like, so there's one example. I'll give you one example. It was well, I'll save it for later because it's more related to back pain. So, and we're talking about ACL rehab here. So, and then, so, we're using the same prescription model, the force generation per set, and then the force generation capacity when they're doing the exercise. So how many repetitions, not how many repetitions you can do, but how much force can you generate before you start to drop off. And we're using that as your, again, I'll go through it again. It's like I want you to generate the minimum amount of FG as your force generation per repetition. FGC is, what you're generating per set, and then your WFGC is what you're going to do per workout. And then get the technology into their hands and let them go with it. Oh, I did. Oh, yeah, okay. So I did screw that up. Well, we're going to skip the low back pain. So obviously I was talking about, I missed that part, but that's okay. We'll talk about it again some other time. So let's go right to stopping aging. So the people that are dealing with aches and pains. So if you're in fitness and or reconditioning, or like I'm doing, I work with a lot of clients that are just like, I'm sick of being stiff and sore and all this sort of stuff. I want to be able to, I don't want to feel like I'm aging anymore. I want to get back into shape, and I want to do things properly. And this is really there are a ton of clients that are here, over the age of 35. People, and 35 might seem young, depending on where you're at as a practitioner, but 35 is a pretty big marker for people that they start to feel like waking up like, oh, why is that sore? And why is this? They don't understand their bodies the way we understand them. So if you're a fitness professional, personal trainer, kinesiologist, strength conditioning coach, whatever it is, grasping these people right at that point where they're sort of feeling that they've come to you and I want to get in better shape. Okay, you want to get in better shape? Well, understand where you are on this timeline, and these are the things we're going to work towards so that we can get you exactly where you need to go, and without risk. So, the stop aging, definitely, I would say 98% of the clientele that I see are in PFP1 when they show up. So, they might feel like, okay, I just want to get back in and do a P90X or whatever training program, that's out there, Insanity, all these old programs that were around, and then some of the newer ones, whatever they are, they see it online. It's like, these are the things that I want to do. But, they know they have these aches and pains, and they want to maybe make sure they're doing it a little bit more intelligently. Having the conversation about this reconditioning timeline and where they're at, start them at measuring their imbalances. So looking at systematically, maybe they're standing crooked. Maybe they got more force one way or another. I had a client who was, had thoracic pain, rib pain, and her full capacity, I do this one test where it elicits a torque force on their bodies. And her full capacity to stay straight with that torque force, just an isometric torque force to pull herself straight, was 4 pounds. So this is like, okay, this doesn't seem good. We test the other side. Her full capacity on the other side was 8 pounds. So just generally, these numbers are very, very low. But from an imbalance point of view, yeah, things are really messed up because they are 100% different. And when we start looking at these types of things, these are the things that we want to correct. And another guy, we're doing like hamstring, we're setting him up for just prescribing a hamstring curl exercise for the program that he was doing that day. And he could generate 30 pounds of one-time force with one leg, and he could generate he could generate 30 pounds of force with one leg, and he could generate 35 pounds of force with the other leg. And then we did the force generation capacity test to see how much they could do. And he could generate with the leg that he could generate 30 pounds of force. He got to about 450 pounds of FGC, his force generation capacity. And with the leg that he could get to 35 pounds, which, to be honest, when I tested him, didn't seem that different. Maybe it was in setup, maybe it was just, whatever. His force generation capacity on the other leg was 650 pounds. And I was like, whoa, that's like very different. And he stood up and was like, oh, that's true. I tore my hamstring 2 years ago. So he had this latent injury that he hadn't discussed with me because he didn't remember. And his hamstring really wasn't that sore. But when he saw that, he was like, oh, I really need to work on this. I didn't have to say anything to him. It was, he was self-motivated to now correct this. And he had the exercise to do it. And within a few weeks had like really built up and corrected this imbalance on his own, with the exercises that I prescribed. So, starting with that at PFP1, you're looking at their imbalances, and start correcting those as early as possible, because imbalances are one of the number one leaders to injury is training with imbalances. These are the people that end up with tweaking their backs and pulling a hamstring, stuff like that. Oftentimes it's the imbalance that leads to it. It's not necessarily that they're weak. It's that their system isn't operating properly because this imbalance exists. Okay, so in PFP2, what we're looking at is their ability to control their body. And this has been a very difficult phase, I think, for a lot of people that are in my line of work and our line of work, where we're trying to really teach people how to control their bodies. We're giving them, this is the phase where you're sort of giving them these obscure exercises. So how to, manipulate their lower back to be into the right position. We're getting into bear crawl positions and stuff like that. Early in my career, I'm giving this to athletes and they're like, what is this crazy exercise you're giving me? I just want to do squats and bench press and this, that, whatever. And it's, I understand it. I understand it's like, oh yeah, it's a bit of a weird drill, but I need you to be able to control this before we move on. Well, as soon as we can start to measure this stuff, it's like, we teach them, fundamental control. So, okay, from here, how to position your lower back, and dissociation means they can control their lower back without everything else moving, right? You get a lot of clients, they, every time you ask them to move just their lower back, their whole body moves, whatever. Okay, first we establish that they can just do this on their own and not affect everything else. A lot of systems stop there. You get in a dead bug position. Oh, can you move this? Can you move that? Okay, once you can do it, okay, let's go off and do some squatting. No, that's not how it works. How it works is, okay, now you have control. Now we're going to add stress. So one of the things I often talk about is under increasing stress. So you have body control, perfect. We're going to add stress in all kinds of different directions and still see if you have that body control. So that doesn't mean I'm going to go to deadlifts right away and see if they can control it. I might just do an isometric, have them hold a resistance band on one side, see how much force they can resist, and still be able to control that position. Because you're going to see that as soon as you add stress to the system, that all of a sudden they don't have control. All of a sudden they freeze up again. And it's because the system is going back into its default programming and saying, we're just going to lock this down because we don't feel like we have control of this because we feel an outside source. And now the whole thing just became more complicated. Okay. How much force can you do it? Just a tiny little bit of force. Oh, okay, you can do it there. And then, because we have something objective, we've measured it, we start with isometric stuff, and the client understands, oh, now I can build up, and it's inspirational to them. It's like, oh, I can build up more force and still be able to control this. And all of a sudden, this obscure exercise isn't obscure anymore. It's a real exercise that they can see progress and motivate themselves to move forward. So super important at this phase that we train this control UIS under increasing stress. So we start with isometric drills, and then we move to concentric drills, or you can do eccentric drills or whatever, but essentially moving drills. We can move to moving drills and then get, so if we're in isometric, we're just looking at how much force they generate and they hold it static. As soon as we go to concentric, then we're measuring force generation capacity with that movement. And it's a mix of the two. So here's an exercise to do. You're going to be moving, doing this. And at the same time, you need to be able to demonstrate that you still have control of your posture and you're not losing all of that sort of stuff. And it's a really great methodology to carry people through this reconditioning timeline. So, and those of you that are in, at the strength and conditioning, personal trainer end of things, and reconditioning for that matter, people are starting to feel really good now. So they have control. They have control under stress. Okay, so moving away from just having control under stress, now we look at biomechanical stability or core training. I do most of my core stuff in a standing position because now, and traditionally with core, we've had to do like planks and side planks and all these things that have a different actual imprint with our feet. So if I'm pulling to the side or I'm pushing to the side like that, the imprint is different than if I'm doing a side plank and both my feet and my arms are pushing in the same direction. So I tended to move away from that sort of stuff. Not only that, but if we're looking at biomechanical stability, then, if I can hold resistance, something pulling me to the side, I can pull back, get into that posture. Well, how much force can I generate there? And how much force can I work against and develop some real biomechanical stability or core strength. So core strength typically being, isometric, not always, but biomechanical stability might be through movement, that we do this movement and they, maintaining their posture under stress. So there's a bunch of stuff that I do, a bunch of drills that we do for measuring biomechanical stability. So whether it's to the side, front, back, rotation, that sort of stuff, we're measuring all these types of things and we're showing them their progress in their biomechanical stability. Because this is one of the things that clients don't really, it's like, well, how many push-ups is good, and how long should I hold a plank and a side plank? And there's not a real measurable with it. Well, now we can add this very real, measurable, and something that they can work towards. So, and then the accountability part. So we talked about this. So we're just talking about prescription and tracking. And the accountability part of this, which I talked about early on, is that 3 phases of accountability. And this is really important, the 3 possibilities. If we're measuring everything and we can get our clients to do, understand what they need to do for the force generation capacity, and then the WFCG, then they can come back and show us they did their exercises or they didn't. And when they didn't do their exercises, like I said before, this is a mindset thing. They're not going to go off to another practitioner and say, I saw Greg and it didn't help. It's going to be very cognizant in their head that they didn't do the stuff that they were asked to do. But if they come back and they say, I did my exercises, then there's 2 options now. One is, you did your exercises and we're progressing. Excellent. Let's keep going. 2 is, I did my exercise and we're not progressing. Well, maybe as a practitioner, the accountability needs to be on my side. I look at, okay, what did we do? What were the expectations? Did you do the exercises right? Yeah, you did them right. Okay, well, maybe they were the inappropriate stuff. Maybe that's not exactly what the crux of the problem is. and then we can correct and learn and grow and build our businesses and become better at our jobs because we're getting real-time data. And so super important that the accountability is on both sides there. Yeah, and that's exactly what I talked about. The options are no, I didn't do the exercise. Yes, I did the exercise and I'm getting better. No. And what you see on the other side is so that's just our app. It shows, what the goal was, how much force they needed to generate over the 42 days of this goal. That's just from my phone, to be honest. And what their force generation per day, to attain their goal. So that it's actually their FGC per day. So to attain this goal, they had to, I would have to do 8,500 pounds per day. It just so happened on that day that I did a 20,000 pound workout. And then what my total force generated to date is, and that's just a good ongoing marker for people. So if we look at how this prescription model looks on a prescription sheet when we're giving them exercises, so we start by like anyone else, we're going to give them a series of exercises to do. So I do a standing pull. So this is the this is the sheet I do. Incidentally, I actually prescribe, and I give a hard sheet, a piece of paper to them. So it's not all digital. They have the option for digital, but one of the reasons I do that is because we do a little drawing of their picture. It's great to have a video. They have access to a video, and that's fine. But it's the handwritten notes on how to do the exercise. And the reason I do that is because people will remember more when it's handwritten. So anyway, that's just a complete aside, but that's one of the things I do. So we do a standing pull. And the prescription is 40 pounds per repetition. So I want you to be at or above 40 pounds per repetition. And you've tested this with them to make sure that that's appropriate for them. Then you tested their FGC and they were above or at or above or close to 400 pounds per set. Okay, so every set you do, I want every repetition to be at or above 40 pounds. And I don't stop until you get at or above 400. And I want you to do 4 sets. So your FGC is 1,600 pounds per workout. And then we go through all of that with all of the different exercises, and that gives you so we set the goal. So this goal is for 42 days, but it could be for 2 weeks. It could be for a week. It could be for whatever it is that you're trying to do. So just walking through how, and if you're using any kind of other software, check to see the functionality of it. If you already have a system, you don't need our system. Use whatever system you want. But you should be able to set your goal up like this. So you set, whatever your timeline is. Based on that timeline, then here you can see on the third page, the force, it's how much force you should generate over that timeline. You sort of have to do the math on that to figure that out. And then when they go and do their workout, one of the important things that we built into the Acculate, that if you're using your own force dynamometer and you're trying to make sure that they are doing the right amount of work. How your accumulation is set up is really important. So if it says max at the top there, this is the threshold we need them to get to, is the 40,000 pounds, the 40 pounds per repetition. If the load now is how much force they're generating at the time. If it's too low, it shouldn't count towards your FGC. So it's just important that you know that, because you don't want them doing like a bunch of light repetitions that aren't intense enough and doing it enough times to build up the right accumulation. So it needs to, whatever system you're using needs to have the enough, needs to be programmed properly that the accumulation happens if they're working hard enough. So that you can see here, when they get to their set total, it's like, okay, they got over 400, so they get 426 for their set. Perfect, great. Then, maybe they go doing the second exercise and the third exercise. And what we can do is you can reset the set total every single time, and the workout total continues to accumulate. So, you go to do your second set and you got to 430, and now we're at 856 for your WFGC. So, and then the other thing that it needs to have that we built into ours is when they've completed the goal, and you can see here from our examples, you set up an 80,000 pounds. They needed to do 80,000 pounds over the 2 weeks, based on the number of workouts we wanted them to do. And because I was just setting up this example, they only did 856 pounds that day. And, so they still need to, so then the next problem people run into, if you don't have a force dynamometer, or if you've looked at purchasing force dynamometers in the past, sounds expensive to set it up, because now you need to get force dynamometers into your clients' hands. And that's a real problem. And when I was looking at solving this for myself, this is the whole reason I got into this, was just to solve this problem for myself. Then I looked at, okay, what do we need to do? And one of the things that I couldn't understand is I couldn't understand why I could get an industrial fish scale that was good for 400 pounds for $60 or $60, I think it was, off Amazon. But a force dynamometer from a company in the field was $800, $1,200, $2,000. Seemed ridiculous to me. And I wanted to be able to get the technology into my clients' hands. So this is something that we worked on, is making sure that our smart anchor is affordable enough to have a bunch of them, so that your clients can go and train with them, whether it's in your facility or you lend, rent, sell it to them, and make a little bit extra money by doing that. But you're essentially making money by doing the right thing, getting the right technology into the right hands, so that they can do the right stuff. So so here's what we've come up with, what our offer is. And again, if you got your own force dynamometer, it's fine, you don't need to do this. But if you're like us, you're a maverick in our health system, and you want to do better with your clients and get the right technology into their hands and really help them, then this is definitely what you want to be looking at. So the first thing is learning how to transform your clients' outcomes from like educational, informative, expert content, whatever. What we're looking at is giving you all of the courses to be able to understand exactly what you need to be able to do. Go through, some of the stuff that we went through today, but in much more detail. So, full course on intro to force-based training. Like, we touched on it here. There's a bunch of other stuff to talk about. Maximizing your clients' buy-in and trust. This is a huge thing on, and we're going to talk about it again in our lives, but we'll briefly go through this stuff. Setting meaningful goals is huge and very, very much done wrong in our industry right now. And I'll show you very much simpler ways to get your clients' head around this stuff so that they're very, very effective. We offer that course as well. And then mastering the art of prescription, essentially, is another full course that you get with this whole package that we're offering. So that's the first part of it, is transforming the outcome. Then you'll when you start working with us, what you get is access to the video library, and it's a video library that's continuing to grow as we go, based on questions we get and and some of the new stuff that we're testing that we can show you. Have access to all of that sort of stuff. You have access to live sessions where you can, problem solve, troubleshoot, some of the issues that you're having with a client to figure out, okay, I needed to do this exercise. How do I set it up? I understand. I've gone through the whole thing. I've sort of made little adjustments here and there to make sure that works really well with my clients. And it's going to be something that we come across. That's fine. Access to the exercise video library, all of that sort of stuff. That's all part of it. And monthly, we do live educational sessions. So based on, going through case studies, stuff that people got submitted, all that sort of stuff is something you'll have access to as well. The other thing is, I have two twice. That's funny. This is actually number 3 in the offer, is the Activate devices. So the smallest package, we're not going to offer this for long because I think we're going to go to a slightly bigger package, is with this, you're going to get a practitioner device, one for you to be able to assess and do your work with, and then 2 other they're trackable client devices. So they have a QR code on the side so that you make sure you get the device back or the device gets paid for. So immediately you'll have 3 devices. You can pick 2 clients to test this all out with and test out the guarantee, essentially, to see how well it works. And if in 45 days you find that with those couple of clients, it's really not working, it's not really the thing you want to do, you want to go back to what you were doing, yeah, that's fine. If you either love it or you get your money back. So there's no risk to you. So that's the way we want to set up. So what my expectation would be for another company. So that's how we set it up. So the value of all of this is pretty close to $2,500 US. And what we're offering now to get people into the system and make sure that they, get going and get the information they need and get the education behind it. And, all of the courses that we give are eligible for continuing education points if you're looking for that, or continuing education credits. And you can try it for 4 months and then cancel after that. So it's $529 plus $47 a month after the first month. And again, within 45 days, you need to, you don't want to do this, and you'll get all of your money back, no questions asked. If you don't like it, whatever, it's totally fine. So you can find it right now in the product shop, our product shop at Acculate.com, and it's in our Shopify store. So it's not. Don't think it's on the website right now, this offer, because this is an offer for people that have watched the live stream, or at least watched the recording while it was up. So head over there and claim yourself what will be something that doesn't, I'll be honest with you, won't last very long. So, so give you a chance to get in, try it, let us know what you think without any real risks. For any of you that have comments or questions, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, we're streaming live in all of those places right now. Load up your comments and questions, and I will do my best to peruse all of those after the fact, and then create some more content answering the questions that you have. More than you have commentaries on more things you want to be able to see, or things you want me to talk about in the future. I'm more than open to do all of that. So it's been I love doing this stuff. I've been a maverick in the business for a very long time, and I've always sort of pushed the envelope on staying away from what the status quo is. And really, one of my biggest things is I will always do what's in the best interest of the client at all times, no matter what what we're talking about. You don't have to follow this or do that because everyone's doing that. No, I've always looked at it like, what can we do? What can we do better? How do we help our clients the best way possible? And I believe if you're a maverick in the business like we are, that you're looking for the same thing. So hit us up, send us a DM, send us a comment, have a look at our product page, and look for our next live stream. If you sign up for the live stream, then you can be on Restream with us, and we can answer your questions live. And we're here to help. So I wish you the best, and we will see you in the next live stream.